Welcome to Summer 2. We are the Iranian American Bar Association, Northern California chapter. We're a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization. My name is Ali Asare. I am on the board of directors of IABA NorCal and one of your co-hosts today.
Good evening, everyone. And I am Sogol Shishtarian, also on the board of IABA NorCal and your other co-host today.
Summer 2 is the second installment of our Summer 6 series. For those of you who are joining us today for the first time, Summer 6 is a series of 6 programs that we'll be hosting this summer, each one having a theme. And the idea is to have inspiring, amazing leaders from our communities who can share their aha moments, their epiphanies, their lessons that changed their lives and their careers. And so we're super happy to have our guests today, and thank you for joining us.
Each of the Summer 6 programs is dedicated to a life-changing theme. Today's theme is community, and we have with us 4 wonderful guests who started off as co-workers, then became friends, and then became an amazing network.
So let's introduce them. We have with us today Rahel Seifu. Rahel, do you mind waving? Rahel is a senior counsel at Google and a member of the board of directors of the public company CME Group. I understand she is the youngest director of CME Group, and we'll need to fact check this, but I think she may be the youngest or one of the youngest public company directors in the US. Next, we have Masayo Nobe. Masayo, do you mind waving? Hi, Masayo. Masayo is Assistant General Counsel at Fastly. I think, Masayo, you were maybe the 3rd or 4th lawyer when you joined, and Fastly went public last year. So congratulations on that amazing achievement.
We also have Dana Peck, a former Big Law lawyer who is now the CEO and co-founder of Pilot R&D, as well as Render Foods. You may have seen their healthy and delicious products at your local grocery store. Make sure to check them out. And last but not least, we have Ying Huang, please wait, Associate General Counsel, AR/VR at Facebook.
Fantastic. So before we get it started, a little bit about the structure of today's program. So like last week, we will start with a little interview session to hear from our 4 amazing guests. And then we'll have a short break. We'll do Q&A. You will see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat box. I see some folks already chatting. That's fantastic. We would have loved to open this up as a regular Zoom meeting, but we had 100+ registrants for our first event. And so we want to keep it tight as a webinar, but please feel free to interact, send your questions and answers throughout. We'll get to those. And then finally, we'll close it out with a recap of today's lesson so all of us can leave this session today with some concrete takeaways to add to our lives. But before we start, as you know, we wanted to use the Summer 6 as an opportunity to support our amazing local artist community. So today we have with us a fantastic artist, Michael Long. Michael, do you mind waving?
Hello.
Great. Michael's lists of accomplishments is indeed long, but I'll mention a couple. He is a concertmaster of Mozart to Mendelssohn Orchestra in the Bay Area, and he regularly plays with the Bay Area Rainbow Symphony and the Sonoma County Philharmonic.
To start us off, Michael will play a beautiful tune. While he is playing, you will see a poll flash on your screen. Please take a moment to respond. Welcome to Summer 2, and let's get started. Michael?
Thank you very much, and thanks so much for including me in this. For my first selection today, I'm going to play a piece by Johann Sebastian Bach from his cello suite, actually, arranged for violin. I know as me and my colleagues have been sheltered in place, we've been going back to some of the literature written for solo instruments, since we can't play as an orchestra. So this is one of the best examples of that kind of music.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael. That was lovely. Great. Now that we're all in good mood, let's get started. Thank you for those of you who voted. Just to share the results, the question was, how good do you think you're at networking? And I'm actually surprised and pleased that a majority of the people put average or very good, which is fantastic. And some folks put below average and that they're weak at it. So today, hopefully, will be a great session to unlock some of that and talk a little bit about that. So on that note, I'll start with Rahel. Rahel, all of our attendees see the four of you on screen, you, Dana, Masayo, and Ying, but they don't know that you guys all know each other. So can you please tell us a little bit about your relationship and how you all know each other?
Yeah, of course. So we all were corporate associates at Morrison & Foerster, and we overlapped in the San Francisco office. I overlapped primarily with Dana and Masayo and a little bit with King. And so we got to know each other through kind of being in the throes of things at work. When you have the kinds of challenges that you face at a law firm, it's really helpful to have a community of other associates to be able to lean on. But what we started doing after I left the firm was actually even more meaningful to me. So about 4.5 years ago, we started doing monthly dinners among the four of us, and we would take turns hosting each other.
Hey, Rahel, I'm so sorry to interrupt. It's a little hard to hear you. Do you mind getting closer, speaking up? That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, please just.
Perfect.
Okay.
It's better.
So about 4.5 years ago, we started doing rotating dinners with each other, and it's been a great way. We do them monthly, but it's been a great way to be able to stay in contact with each other, to be able to run things by one another, and to catch up both personally and professionally.
Awesome, thank you. Just to recap, for those of you who may have not heard, so Rahel and the other three guests, they all worked at Morrison & Foerster at one time, and they were kind of friends. I'll actually hand it to Dana. Maybe Dana, you can take us from there. You were all kind of friends and coworkers, but after you kind of were all leaving, half of you had left the firm, half of you were still there. You kind of started having this lunch group that became a community. So I'll hand it to you, Dana, from here.
Sure. Yeah, we were all senior corporate associates at MoFo. So we were really a resource for each other. We had a really close-knit collegial group of corporate associates at MoFo, and we're fortunate for that. And we got to know each other pretty well through that, but then ultimately, sort of one by one, we all left Big Law and to go into different fields and spheres of more in-house and corporate practice, and wanted to maintain that friendship and that network so that we could continue to pull from each other as resources as we grew our career outside of the confines of Big Law. And I think as you find when you evolve your career and you leave big law, at least for me, one of the big things that you lose is having that brain trust all over the floor so that you can just walk door to door and have a sounding board of people who are incredibly intelligent and experienced at what they're doing. It's very easy to ask questions, to get feedback, to help work through problems. But when you leave that, you may be in a situation where you are the only lawyer in your organization, or you're one of only a couple, and it becomes harder and harder to have those sounding boards and those resources. And so we've found it very powerful to maintain our relationship and grow our relationship since then, so that we continue to have a really close-knit group of brilliant lawyers who we can pull from to help us continue to grow our careers.
That's amazing. So I would love to hear some more about these, like how you actually did that with these lunches that you had after you had left. So Messiah, I'll turn it to you. You know, how was your getting together, and how were the conversations, and that like first lunch you all grabbed together? Like how did the momentum start from that?
I think it was actually a dinner first, right, ladies?
Dinner for a while until we got older and married and
yeah. I mean, it just started with something so simple. You know, it was, hey, haven't seen you in a while. It'd be nice to catch up. Let's get together. And I think that's something that everyone on this, you know, webinar has said themselves, right? So it doesn't take much. I think that maybe being 4 corporate attorneys who all had to project manage big M&A deals, we had a tendency to say, okay, like when's the next one? You know, like we have to keep this going. And so it was very organic. I think one of the things that is fairly unique about this is, you know, it's not like we all talk to each other every day. It's a periodic thing. When we have, you know, one get together, we schedule the next one, or, you know, like we say, okay, like we all have to get going, but, you know, we'll be in touch, and we make a commitment to each other to schedule it. But yeah, I mean, I echo what Rahel and Dana have said. Like, it's been really nice because once you leave the firm, you really do lose that network, the brain trust, and it's really valuable, you know, professionally for sure, but also just as friends and as humans to be able to say, okay, like I have a stupid question, or have any of you had to take a guess at this question? I think just being able to admit that you're not superhuman and you're not an encyclopedia all the time is really a nice thing to have.
That's awesome. I'd love if we have time to listen to all of your challenges now being in-house, and Dana being a CEO, not being surrounded by a team of lawyers all the time, and how you'd manage that. So I would love to talk about that later. Ying, I'll turn it to you. What was the first dinner like for you? Did you have fun?
Yeah, somehow they managed to keep me coming back to these dinners. No, I mean, I really, really value the consistency with which we have all put in time to maintain these relationships. I think especially, you know, I've noticed in San Francisco, there's a tendency to be kind of flaky and cancel and say, let's get lunch, let's get dinner. And it's like, yeah, we'll do that, right? And I think, I mean, between the 4 of us and all the things that we have going on, I think there's probably only 1 or 2 days a month that the 4 of us actually have. I mean, Rahel's always traveling the world. Dana is running off doing this and that and the other. Messiah is, you know, going public with her company. I mean, we probably between the 4 of us honestly have like a 5-hour window every month. And we use that time and we commit it to each other. And we have for 4 years. So, you know, I think it's that kind of commitment to making sure that we prioritize this time, that we're not kind of flaky and dodgy about it, and that we follow through. That's kind of what's allowed this to kind of evolve into what it has, even without us really, you know, noticing until recently. We were like, when did this first one happen? And we found the first email was almost 4 years ago. Oh no, almost 5 years ago. Is that right?
That's great. Thank you guys for like sharing the background of how you guys met and how you continue to meet up. Inspiring, and also being new to San Francisco. I love hearing stories of community like this. Something that Ali also touched on and you all mentioned. I'll start with you, Rahel. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how the group that you created and the sounding board you guys mentioned and how that's helped you in your current position?
Sure. So I'm a hybrid product and commercial counsel at Google, which means that I help our product teams issue spot risk, whether it's around privacy, consumer protection, any applicable regulations, data security, really across the board, depending on the team I'm supporting. And on the commercial side, I negotiate agreements for them, whether it's a software license agreement or a hardware purchase or a partnership agreement, really depending on the team's needs. And I would say my situation is a little bit different than some of what you've heard so far, in that Google's legal department is massive. There are hundreds of attorneys. So I do have people that I can go to as sounding boards for the work. That said, those people don't necessarily know me in the same way that these girls do. And so when it comes to navigating situations at work in terms of, you know, people situations, or even just trying to think about an issue with a different perspective, and maybe from like a non-Google lens, obviously respecting confidentiality and not sharing any proprietary Google information. They're such useful sounding boards for that sort of thing, because I know that I don't have to give them as much background because they understand, they know me well enough that we're sort of starting from a place of understanding already. And also just to be supporters and like champions for each other. Like it's really helpful to have people that can help like boost your morale and make you feel good about yourself when you're going into the office each day. And we do that for each other.
That's great. Dana, I'll ask you the same question. And as a CEO and now in a different role, how is this group, how does it help you? How has it helped you? If you could share some of that.
Yeah, it's been incredibly valuable. I run 2 small businesses, and so I am the only, you know, obviously I'm the only lawyer. I'm also the only business person. I'm the only one running our organizations. And so it's a very solo practice, and I have to sort of machete my own path out there. And there's a lot of things that are obviously a little bit more formulaic. You're starting a business, you have to form the entity, you have to have organizational documents, you need to figure out some employment agreements. But after that, it becomes much more murky. You have to figure out what kind of strategic partnerships do you want? What kind of direction do you want to take your company? What are the pitfalls that could be out there? How do you think about them? And it's not only very challenging to do that on your own, you really shouldn't, in my opinion. One person is not capable of issue spotting everything that you can think about in building and running a business. And so I am incredibly reliant upon these guys and being able to talk to them about things to figure out, like, what am I missing? What haven't I thought about? What other perspectives might somebody have on this? Even just talking about my business and then asking questions will, you know, generate new thoughts or ideas I have about, oh, that's really interesting. Like, I didn't realize that's how somebody might perceive what our business is or what we're doing. And maybe I should think about marketing it in a different way, or talking about it in a different way, or taking it in a different direction. So especially when you're at a small business, small company, when you don't have a lot of legal resources or others around you, it's pretty critical to have a great group of friends and a great network to lean on, because, you know, doing this on your own is just a very hazardous way of doing it.
Thank you, Dana. And Masayo, can you tell us a little bit about your role at Fastly and how it's also intertwined with your group of friends here?
Sure. So when I joined the company, I was the third lawyer. And I think we were 200 and something employees. We're now, I think, north of 700. And we have, I think, 12 attorneys. And so I've sort of seen the life of a smaller company. It's definitely no Facebook or Google by any means, but we've had to scale, and that process involved me wearing many hats. I do mostly corporate work now, but that wasn't always the case. And so one of the really valuable things, I think in terms of scale and the kind of work that we do, I see sort of myself as in between Dana on the one hand and Ying and Rahel on the other hand. So it's incredibly helpful for me to see how do the really big tech companies do this? And is that something that we should be headed towards in the next, 5 years, 10 years, whatever that timeline is? I think on the other hand, like getting Dana's perspective on what it takes to run a business, how many different pieces like have to fit together. That's been really helpful for me to not just look through the legal lens, but look through, am I thinking about how a CFO might look at this situation? And, I get all of that from Dana. So it's been super helpful.
I love that. I'm like, hopefully I will have friends like this down the line too. That's great, guys. And last but not least, Ying, can you tell us more about your role at Facebook and also the interactions with this group?
Let me unmute first. I work in the AR/VR team at Facebook, and so you might know that more specifically as our consumer hardware products. That would be the Portal device, which you can use to make a phone call and video, or the Oculus VR headsets, which have gotten more popular now during lockdown as well. And so it's an interesting mix because Facebook is an entirely, all-encompassing kind of organization. We've got hundreds and hundreds of lawyers worldwide, but the AR/VR organization is a very small division within that. And when I joined, I was one of 2 lawyers on our immediate legal team in my division. That has now combined with another group, and we've grown to probably about 50 to 70 lawyers now. I don't know the exact number because we grow so quickly and change every day. But, in that transition from working at a big firm to going in-house, you really see kind of all the different flavors of what going in-house might mean. And I've talked to a lot of people about this, where if you work in a big law firm, you can switch between one and another. And there's a lot of fungibility there, right? Like you're drafting an M&A agreement, it's gonna look the same whether you're at Mofo, whether you're at Latham, whether you're at White & Case. But when you go in-house, it's such a different world, and it's really hit or miss of what you're gonna get and what the day-to-day life is gonna be like. And so it's really interesting when you see all of your former colleagues who used to sit on the same floor with you go to all these different places, and everybody has such a different daily life, right? Like what you do day-to-day, the pace of your work, the scope of your work. And so for me, it was very informative to me to even decide what kind of job I wanted when I moved in-house, right? We've all taken very, very different paths. And I think we're all fulfilled in very different ways. And so kind of having access to knowing what is it like to be the only lawyer on your team at a startup? What is it like to be at a mid-sized company? Or what is it like to be at a very, very kind of developed late stage company that has all this infrastructure, right? That was a huge data point for me in deciding, okay, now that I'm leaving big law, what's the environment that I think I'll thrive in? And I think, we're kind of a very broad sample of the kinds of jobs you can have after you leave big law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And Ying, maybe I'll start back with you for this round because, when I was in law school and when I was a junior associate at the firm, everyone kept telling me, Ali, like, be nice to your colleagues now because they will be your future network. And it never really clicked for me because, I would look around and it was really hard to kind of imagine where people are going to end up, or we were all so young. Nobody had a position of any sort of power or authority. So it was kind of never clicked. And what I loved about all your four story is how it was really like the way you approached this network was really as friends. I mean, it started as being friends, and then you had really helpful conversations and you kept it going. So I guess that's one idea to unpack is kind of how did the friendship help you kind of build this network, especially for those of us who may be like shy socially or not be as good as, when you go to a cocktail hour or something. So I would love if you unpack that a little bit for us.
Sure. I mean, it all started, I was the last of the four of us to join the group in San Francisco. I'd actually spent 4 years in the San Diego office and transferred, and not only looked at them as colleagues and friends, but in a lot of ways mentors. They kind of knew the lay of the land. They knew who the partners were, who might be, particular in certain ways, let's put it. And when I got there, it was a huge resource to leverage these women who, had spent years there before me. And I kind of allowed them to kind of show me the way to navigate that world and how to do deals. I did a deal with Messiah. I think my first deal was with Rahel. She's my senior associate. And then I did a couple of deals with Messiah. And, that kind of organic, looking at the people around you and being nice to everyone because they're going to be your network. I think that's kind of a back of the mind thought. If you're just a nice person and you gravitate toward the people around you, and I feel like in a law firm environment, it's very important to have that community because it's tough. It's a tough one to survive. And I can't imagine how without kind of those resources and people guiding you and, teaching you the way of, okay, well, this partner likes you to do things this one way, or this is how you would make sure that you don't miss this particular point, or let me help find a exemplar document for you. That's just something that organically comes together. And, I think for me personally, I don't really thrive in an environment where you're thrown into a classic networking situation. Like if you're sent to some happy hour with strangers and then you're supposed to give out your business card and try to make friends, like that's a very challenging environment for me. So having these people, take advantage of that, right? Whether it's your colleagues and coworkers or the people that you went to law school with, they're all going to be doing things in law. Maybe they're at different firms than you, but keeping contact with those people, you never know where they'll end up. So losing touch is kind of a loss of a connection that you already have.
Yeah, I'll jump on that for a second too, is that, when we were at MoFo, this in the San Francisco office, we started a support group for corporate associates called Everybody But the Partners. I'm hoping that was a hard fought for group. I'm hoping that continued long after we left. But the purpose of it is, a lot of us who practice in big law know it's a really tough job and you need a lot of support. And we all have our individual offices and we can close our doors all day and we can be sequestered and secluded from one another, but that's not the best way to do the job. And so, in our group, we started this support group and we got together for lunch every Friday. And the purpose of that group was to form really good relationships and support one another so that if somebody was really struggling, we could help them. We could give them the right exemplar. We could tell them how to navigate a certain partner issue. We could cover for each other. And that was a really critical group. And it was hard fought for, including getting the partners to pay for lunch. And it feels like a small thing, but when there was food, everybody would show up. If it was just a random hour in a conference room, everybody was kind of busy. But if you made sure there was food, people show up. And part of the reason that we started this as a dinner movement. You know, when there's food, people are extra motivated to show up. And, you know, that was really valuable. I've seen in other groups and in other firms, when you don't have that support and the associates are all kind of, you know, out for themselves and aren't as supportive, the morale in those groups is much lower. And so I think that collectively we did much better because we had that support network. So I very clearly remember a time when I had a vacation scheduled and I had a really hardcore M&A deal that I knew was unfortunately going to be a painful one. And Messiah stepped up and covered for me, which was an incredible thing. And not a lot of people would do that kind of thing. And at a lot of firms, that does not happen. And I was incredibly grateful for it. And it's that kind of mentality that you should start in your firms. You should start it now. You should be supporting and helping each other through it, and then just carrying that forth if you leave and go somewhere else, because doing these jobs is tremendously challenging, and you need help both personally and professionally to do it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Dana. I years later, I went to MoFo and I took so much value out of that Friday Everybody But Partners group, the ABTB group. And it's amazing that like you set it up and years later down the line, I benefited from it and I met a lot of people.
I did not originate it. Those who came before me did, but it almost died a few times. So I ensured that I ensured that it maintained, and it lost a lot of funding during the last recession, and so there was no food for a little while, so I ensured that it got funded and that there was lunch. So
you'll be happy to know that under my leadership, we increased the food budget and we ordered a lot of Persian food from my favorite San Francisco Persian restaurant, Makehead. So thank you. Yeah,
job.
Thank you. I will close. We're almost done with this segment. Actually, I will save my question for after. So I want to give all of our attendees, especially students, young lawyers, an opportunity to submit your questions. We're going to take a short break with Michael playing another beautiful piece for us. Please keep the questions coming, and then we'll ask your questions after the break.
All right, for my next selection, I wanted to play something as kind of a prayer for healing and peace in our country, especially hoping for an end to the various forms of oppression that people of color face in this country. So I'll play for you an arrangement of Deep River.
Oh, that was very emotional. Thank you, Michael. It was a very timely piece. Appreciate it. We had some questions coming in, so we'll start with those. And our first question actually ties in well with at the conversation we had earlier, Dana, about the group that you helped resurrect. So the question was, it's this era of everything being virtual is new for all of us, especially for our students and young lawyers. So what kind of tips or tricks you have found in the past few weeks to be helpful in terms of keeping your contacts together and your networks together and growing and expanding your network? So Masayo, maybe I'll start with you here. If you mind sharing tips, and also I know you're involved in starting a group in your company right now. So that ties into what Dana was saying, which is a great way of actually building a network in the process. So if you want to tie that into the answer too, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, so I think virtually networking is hard, but I would say that, you know, it's not on you to corral a whole bunch of people and like establish your network. So just know that like you might have 3 friends and those 3 friends have 3 more friends, and that's how it works. And it doesn't take much. I think that both with networking and with, you know, launching support groups, keeping them going, it only takes one person doing one thing, right? Like it's a call to action by one person to be like, hey, like we should get a group to catch up. You know, I think that like we all do this all the time, but like one recent example is Ying, like you and I were like part of a larger, you know, sort of happy hour where we talked to ex-coworkers that we haven't talked to in a long time. And that whole thing started with an email saying, hey, like we haven't talked in a while, like we should catch up. And then it was very organic, you know, oh, we should invite so-and-so, oh, we should invite so-and-so. And then it just sort of happens. And, you know, it doesn't have to be this like huge permanent thing necessarily. I think like catching up with people every once in a while is maintaining your network. Like that is networking, because you're sharing a part of your life with somebody and they're sharing a part of their lives with you, right? Like that's good enough, I think.
And maybe just to put a little more emphasis on the working from home when we're all at home sheltering phase of it. I mean, I'm still doing virtual coffees with people and virtual game nights and things like that help bring people together. And I've had people reach out to me who are new to the company and want to just catch up with someone who's been here for a while to get some learnings. And I've been happy to meet with them and have been, you know, meeting people for the first time over Google Meet. So not Zoom, sorry. But, and it's been, you know, it is like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's definitely tougher to build a connection in that way. But in terms of maintaining relationships, that's something you could be doing. So even if it's your fellow classmates from law school, those are people that you will be able to lean on in later years, and you'll be able to look back on this time together. So making sure that you're still keeping those connections with people, even though you can't be in the same room, still really important.
I'll switch it into another question that one of our attendees had. And that's for those of you who were at Big Law and then switched to in-house. I do think you can all speak to this, having switched to a different role. Do you think it's helped you to start off professionally at Big Law and then move in-house? And then do you have opinions and thoughts on that, given your experiences? We can start with Ying.
Sure. I think Big Law is a fantastic training ground, right? I mean, it's trial by fire. You learn as you go. You pick it up and it's a little bit of sink or swim, but you learn discipline, a lot of discipline, and you know have the ability to repeat things in a controlled manner with people who are supervising you, right? Once you go in-house, like that, you're it. There's nobody's going to check your work. There's nobody who, you know, is an adult in the room to make sure that you're not going to cause some big problem for the company. And so, you know, the years that I spent at Morrison Foerster, I mean, I went straight through law school. So it was my first adult job, right? And so it's wild how certain skills like learning how to write a professional email, how to navigate certain circumstances with something as non-legal related as I asked the client a question, we're running against a deadline and I don't have an answer yet, what do I do, right? There's so many non-substantive things that you learn how to navigate and pick up in a law firm because it's super high pressure, right? And I think it's wonderful training for kind of any career that you want to hold after that. And so I carry a lot of what I learned in big law, even though, you know, for almost 8 years at Morrison Foerster, I was an M&A lawyer. I do 0% M&A work today. But the other skills that I picked up are definitely transferable and very, very important.
I will say though, I think that big law trains you in certain ways, but it's not a necessity. I think I agree with Ying, like the things that are helpful are having someone supervise you, being able to make mistakes, and being able to do maybe the same thing multiple times. Like you can get those in other scenarios too. I think it's more reliably there at big law, but I think if you're careful about vetting, you know, like where you are, like what part of a team, you know, like who's going to be supervising you. It's so much about how much other people are willing to invest in you. So I don't think that big law is a requirement to have a good career. But it is a very, I think, frequently used like channel to like pump out, you know, good attorneys.
Great. We have a question for Rahel specifically, but I think it applies to everyone. So Rahel, the question was, with such busy schedules and with you traveling, you know, all the time, with Dana, you being CEO, with all the work that we all have, and then our personal lives on top of that, how do you keep your connections going over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I used to travel quite a bit until travel sort of came to an end recently. But for last year, I was away from San Francisco, probably more days than I was in San Francisco. And it was about half domestic travel, half international, so quite a bit of it. And I would say that for me, I think I'm able to stay in touch with people because I care so much about it. So for me, you know, not from so much from a networking perspective, but I'm a huge extrovert and I really like people and I care so much about my friends and family that I miss them if I'm not in touch. And so I don't need to have a system, I guess, for it because I naturally just sort of gravitate towards wanting to make sure I can do that. Juggling the time can be really tough, but that's why doing things like dinners are helpful because I need to eat anyway. And so if I'm already going to carve out some time for that, I carve out a little bit more time to do something with my family or with my friends, or trying to mix exercise with it. So going on walks with people, or like another forum where I can, you know, sort of kill two birds with one stone, is another way to sort of juggle when you don't have as much time. And if you don't have time to meet in person, just the simple outreach of giving someone a phone call, sending them an email whenever you're thinking about them to hear what's going on with them, and finding other maybe like less time sensitive ways to make sure that you're keeping up with people and then seeing them live when you can. So it is tough and it can be draining, but for me it's so fulfilling that it's worth it.
Or even like forwarding an article, like you read something on Facebook that you think your friend may like, that's a touch point, right? That will lead to a comment or maybe a like and a conversation. But sorry, back to the panel on that question.
I think, I mean, another just quick tactic is to start text chains or WhatsApp chains with people. I think sometimes it feels overwhelming that you haven't caught up with somebody in months and there's too much to say and you don't have 45 minutes to write a whole in-depth email or an hour for a phone call. So it's easier if you start a text chain with somebody and then you can sort of more casually check in much more regularly by just shooting off, like, you know, how you doing today, or this just happened, or sending a photo or something. It just makes it a little bit easier to keep more regular contact without feeling the pressure of doing like a full check-in and catch up after not talking to somebody for a long time.
One final and quick question from our attendees. You guys gave a great example where you're colleagues and you hung out as friends, and now you have a network, and your network is also connected to, you know, each other's networks, which grows exponentially. Do you think, on the reverse of that, do you think it's possible to network? Is it still a good idea to be messaging attorneys through LinkedIn about companies or positions you're interested in? And you guys have
how do you reach out to a rando?
I think it's most effective if you can find a touch point with them. So whether it's that you're an alum of the same school or they work in a special like niche area that you're particularly interested in. My brother, for instance, is looking at doing product management work in the music space. And so he has been like very targeted about his outreach, and because he can show that he's done his homework and they have this sort of specific thing in common, people are more inclined to accept this sort of blind outreach. And I think the same is true on my end. Like generally, if it's either a friend of a friend or someone who has clearly like looked at what I've done and has found clear parallels where I could be useful to them, then I'm open to that conversation. And I think making sure also that you are very clear about what your ask is. So it's harder if you just say that you want to talk. It's much more, I think you'll have a better chance of success if you say, I want to talk about these 3 things, or I would love to learn from your experience about X, Y, and Z, or I'm weighing whether to take an offer from this place or that place, and I'd love. So like if you can make it more specific as opposed to just an open-ended, can we talk, and you'll have more success.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you need to reach out on LinkedIn. I mean, as Rahel said, getting a warm intro through a mutual connection or something is always 100 times better. But if you're just going to reach out to a random person and they decide to give you some time, I would plan on you getting 30 minutes with that person and not much more. So I would be very targeted in what I wanted to talk about and what questions I had and what advice I was looking for. It's hard for that to become a very long lasting relationship. It's likely you get 30 minutes with that person. And if you're trying to get it to last longer than that, I would think about what value you can bring to their lives in some way too. I mean, I have an example of that having worked out very well for me, but I was just very fortunate in the person that it was. And it wasn't through LinkedIn message. It was actually general counsel at a really great company that I was meeting with. It was theoretically a job interview for a job I wasn't really ready to apply for, and he had already technically filled. But he took the time to meet with me anyway, and we had a great conversation, and we just mutually decided that we wanted to stay in touch. And so we routinely grab coffee and catch up. And somebody I massively respect, and somebody who is invested in my company now. And, that was a complete sort of random initial interaction that we both felt we could build upon. So, and it was about both of us bringing some kind of value to each other's lives. Absolutely reach out to people, but really think about you know, their time is valuable. They don't know you if you're not coming from a warm intro. Be very targeted in what you're looking to achieve from that conversation and figure out if you can bring value to make that a longer lasting relationship.
So
yeah.
Just to give like a super specific example of what doesn't work, and it's not because we want to not, you know, like we don't like helping people, but I get tons of LinkedIn messages, and if one starts, "Hi, I'm a, you know, law student," or "I recently graduated from such and such law school," that's not Michigan, so like, you know, no connection to me. I saw Fastly, and it sounds like a really interesting company. I would love to learn more. You know, I would be very grateful if you could talk to me. Like I do get messages like that. And to Dana's point and to Rahel's point, like it's really hard to commit to that. You know, we're pressed for time already. But on the flip side, I will say that, like, don't forget that the people on the receiving end are people too. So, you know, if you do a targeted message, it might not work. But like that might not be you. Like it might just be the particular person that you sent the message to doesn't have time to help, but maybe the next person does. So I think it's a balance.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Michael, I would love to hear from you too, because you're in a completely different industry, right? You're in music. And so what is your reaction to this whole conversation today, and how, like, what are some lessons in quote unquote networking that you can share with us from your experience that you think applies universally?
Sure. So I moved out to San Francisco about 4 or 5 years ago for a different type of job, working at a university, and I didn't know anyone in the musical community here. So I started to reach out to community music groups and, you know, saying I'm a violinist, I'd love to get involved. And I showed up to a rehearsal of the Bay Area Rainbow Symphony. And after their rehearsal, they were working together, putting stamps on the mailing cards to go out to advertise their concert. So I stuck around and I helped out, you know, added value to what was going on there, and started to meet people and talk to people. And 4 years later, through those connections, you know, I'm teaching and playing full time. I even spent a year as the executive director of the San Francisco Civic Music Association. And what I've learned is, you know, the big orchestra jobs like the San Francisco Symphony, those are posted internationally, and you show up for a blind audition. But the more freelancing jobs are passed around more by word of mouth. And it matters so much whether you are a person that's easy to work with, someone that's friendly, someone that has that kind of reputation. So I found, you know, I don't necessarily actively network, or at least I don't take what I'm doing to be networking. I'm taking it to be putting myself out there, showing that I can do good work, and being friendly. And through those kind of organic connections, you get a ton of opportunities.
Very well said, Michael. And thank you for sharing your experience. And I think what you said applies to our industries too. So I'll summarize everything we said today. Thank you all. When it comes down to it, you want to be friendly, make friends. That's the best way to network and create your community. Definitely schedule things, schedule your, as you guys started, schedule your dinners, and then you started doing that with your lunches at work. And on the third thing, don't be afraid to reach out to your friends or colleagues and ask questions, learn from them, because everything you talk about now will definitely help you in the future too, in different career paths you may take or in the current one. So great learning points. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sobeljan, for summarizing the point. I'll add to that, that it's not that friendship is the only way to networking to me, but the more I advance in my career, I realize networking is really about giving, not taking. The taking comes naturally, but it's really about being helpful. It's about, even if you reach out to a random law firm partner, give them something like, I read your article that you wrote about this. I think this point was great. This other point I'm curious about. So add something to their life, add a curiosity, arouse a curiosity in them. And that's the best way to then the taking will just come on its own. I'll do some thank yous, and then Michael, you'll play your final piece and we'll say goodbyes. But first of all, thank you so much for our amazing guests today, for sharing your time with us. I know how busy you are. It was such a good discussion. I wish we had so much more time. We were just getting warmed up. I wanted to thank all of our attendees for joining us as usual. Our next program will be 2 weeks from today. That's Summer 3. The theme of that is focus. We'll have a US marathon champion and a star public defender. We'll have a law firm person that exclusively does pro bono within the structure of the law firm. And we have one of the youngest CEO and venture capitalists and a very political activist person to talk to us about focus. So super excited about that. IABA is offering 3 scholarships this summer. So please, at the end of the program, we'll put the ways to follow us. Please follow us, all law students and recent graduates. So if you graduated this year, you're eligible to apply. So please take advantage of those opportunities. And again, thank you all. Michael, I'll pass it to you for your final piece, and then we'll say our goodbyes.
All right, for the final piece, I'll play a pair of short dances by Bach, this time originally written for violin. This is a Beret and a jig in E major.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone.